program. Looking forward to this presentation.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. And as you've met some of the participants in our program, you can see that they have some experience, some more than others. I'm looking in the back corner over there. So what we're going to cover today is a little bit of the history of leadership programs, and then we'll specifically go into the Oklahoma program. And then I will share some highlights of what we've seen agriculturally related, not only in Oklahoma, but nationally and internationally. There we go. So the leadership programs for agriculture began at Michigan State University in association with the Kellogg Foundation. They were the ones that helped sponsor the first ones. And that first program was in 1965. And so they've been going ever since then. Our program in Oklahoma, we had a group of agricultural leaders meet starting in about 1980 to discuss this possibility. And we actually formed our first class 1, in 1982. This is a current map of all the programs that we have in the United States. So there are, I have to put my glasses on, 38 programs in the United States. And then there are 5 international programs. And about 3 years ago, we started to include the Nuffield International Program, which is a kind of a ag leadership program that all the others of us do on steroids. They do a lot more interaction internationally, and each of those participants actually have to put together their own anywhere from 6 to 8 month international program individually. So each individual has to put that together to go somewhere internationally, and it may be a series of countries or a concentration in one area of the world, but it's very intense of a program. And they only meet 3 times during their program, where we meet 13 times in our program. So our overall objective is simply to develop future leaders for Oklahoma agriculture. And when we look at that a little more specifically, we are wanting to assist our potential leaders to develop a deeper understanding of themselves and of other people. So this is a great opportunity for us to interact with people in the Stillwater community to learn about you as individuals. And then we also help potential leaders develop a better understanding of various forms of economics and governments. And that's where we travel across the United States and then internationally, where we get the biggest impact of that. And then finally, we want them to increase and utilize their own knowledge and skills in solving problems and other opportunities that we have in the state of Oklahoma related to agriculture. Our program is a 20-month program. We have 13 seminars during that 20-month period. 10 of those are 3-day seminars in our state. We have one that's the first day is kind of in northern Oklahoma, and then 2 days in Kansas. Then we do a week-long seminar, which we kind of call the national seminar, where we spend a couple days in Gettysburg, 4 or 5 days in Washington, D.C., and some of that's in Virginia also. And then the last day we go over into Maryland. And that gives us kind of a national perspective on agriculture. And then we do a 2-week international seminar, and that will occur next month. We also are kind of governed by an Oklahoma Agricultural Leadership Council, and that's made up of 15 to 17 people that are professional people in the state that have leadership positions in various farming organizations or anything related to agriculture. And they work with the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources on campus to help us develop our long-range plans. You might wonder where our funding source comes from. We have about 7 different sources. So we have some corporate donors that just expect us to bill them every year. Our alumni, and then our alumni association, which is called the Agricultural Leadership of Oklahoma. They contribute roughly over the last 10 years, about $35,000 each year. We get a matching grant from the Samuel Roberts Noble Foundation. OSU, the Division of Ag, helps cover my salary and part of my assistant's salary. We have a little bit of state appropriation through the legislature. I write for some grants, and then each class member has a participation fee to participate in the program. You might recognize some of these faces. These are the directors since the beginning. So the first two, Dr. Skeers and Dr. Taggart, each ran the program for 1 year. And then Doctors Williams, Terry, and Williams each ran it for 4 classes. And I am currently in my 6th class, and who knows how much longer I will go. These are just some of the examples of the classes, and these are the most recent classes starting when I became the director. I actually was in the program in class 13. Then my wife went through the program in class 14, and then I became the director starting with class 15. So these are the classes since I've been the director, and you may recognize a few of these people, and I'll just point out a couple of people that have come through our program that have kind of state leadership. In that first picture, the lady in the front with the pink blouse on, that's Blaine Arthur, our Secretary of Agriculture. We've had 5 Secretary of Agricultures in the state since its inception. 3 of them have come through our program. And one of them really wanted to go into the program, but when he wanted to go through at that time, he was too old. We have since taken our upper age limit off. We do have a minimum age limit of 25, but we don't have an upper limit. Now, thank goodness for some of the members in the current class. Then we also have a couple, there's actually 3 people in either the Senate or the House, and 2 of the people in class 16 in the back row, the second person and the 4th person, they are current senators in Oklahoma Senate. And then these are the 3 most recent classes, and the picture in the bottom is our current class, which some of you have met here today. I'm going to go through each of our seminars and just highlight real quickly what we kind of cover in each seminar to give you some examples. And most of these are going to be related to directly visiting farms or ranches or agricultural entities, because it isn't really exciting to show you a group of people sitting in a room. Although we do a lot of that also through the training, through the program, but it's not real interesting to look at. But here, this is our first seminar, which we hold in Stillwater. So we really focus on getting the group to become a group, a family per se. And so we do a lot of intentional interaction, getting to know one another. We go out to the ropes course, do team building activities. We try to define what is leadership. How do you define it? And we bring someone in to help us with that. So they try to make that definition, and then we have someone that really gives us the real definition of what leadership is in agriculture, at least according to the consensus of people that work in this area. Our second seminar, we go to the southwestern part of the state and the kind of the west central. Some of the examples of things that we look at are the cotton industry, which is big down there, although it's expanding more and more. If you're not aware, there's a lot of cotton grown in Kansas now that 20 years ago you wouldn't even think about. So a lot of that depends on the innovations that our breeders have on how the expanse of that production can be in the United States. In the upper right, we're looking at the Canna farm down in Alfalfa. We're looking at the peanuts and sweet potatoes in the hydro area. Our third seminar is with the Noble Research Foundation down in Ardmore and kind of the Mid-South area. So when we're looking up in the sky, we're looking at drone technology. They're leaning on the boar buster, which is a trap that drops down to catch feral hogs. In the lower left, we're looking at regenerative ag. So we're digging a hole in the soil to look at the composition of the soil that the Noble Foundation is now really focusing on, is regenerative ag. And then the wire and steel mill down in Medill, we get to go through that plant and see how they convert a pile of metal junk into wire that we can use in the ag industry. Seminar 4 is kind of focused on communication, and we do that in Oklahoma City. So we do a lot of media training. Ron Hayes, who is a member of class 1, comes in and helps us do some mock interviews and some interview techniques, or how do you interview when somebody wants to know about an ag topic in your area, and how do you not get fooled into going in the direction that they want to go, that you keep focused on the area that you want to cover. Down on the left, we're looking at composting that they do down at the regional food bank. We're looking at leadership skills again with Dr. Terry. And then in the lower right, we're looking at the mesonet system, the weather system that we have in Oklahoma that's fairly unique in any state in the United States. The fifth seminar, we kind of concentrate on the northern part of Oklahoma and then into Kansas. So we're looking at grass seed production. We're looking at Cargill and the meat processing process that they do, and looking at, shelf life is what we're looking at in that photograph there. We look at the oil industry. You might think, well, what does the oil industry have to do with farming? Well, how do you think we operate all of our equipment? So the oil industry and the gas industry is very critical to agriculture, not only in Oklahoma, but worldwide. And then we end up in Wichita looking at the John Deere Training Center and how they can train people literally all over the world on servicing equipment. They have green screens there, and they can bring equipment into a large studio about the size of this room, and they can tear apart a piece of equipment and train their technicians wherever they are in the world, right here in Wichita, Kansas. The sixth seminar is when we spend that week out in the East Coast. So we do some leadership training at the Gettysburg facility. We spend some time at the Capitol. The upper right is where we're meeting with Representative Frank Lucas, who is a great friend of agriculture. We meet at the USDA and have several people from the USDA come and visit with us. And then the bottom right picture is a greenhouse that's in Clinton, Maryland, where they are a major producer of not only bedding plants, but fruits and vegetables and various small commodities. That a lot of that get marketed to the fresh market system in Washington, D.C. The seventh seminar, we're back in Oklahoma City. So we meet with the Department of Ag. We may look at llama production, alpaca production. Obviously, we'll go down to the Capitol and meet with our legislators. And one of the big seminars that we do that we pretty much spend at least a half a day on is water issues in the state. Water is a very critical part of agriculture anymore. And there's kind of this dichotomy of the need for water in urban areas and rural areas, and how do you try to solve that whole issue? So we spend a lot of time with the water issues. Our eighth seminar is back here in Stillwater. We may go over to the Food and Ag Processing Center on campus. We'll go down to Langston and look at their goat research facility. We'll go out to the hydraulic USDA lab northwest of town. And again, then we'll focus on some leadership training and looking at not only how you incorporate what you're learning in this program, but how do you take that out into the real world situation. The ninth seminar, we go out to mainly the Panhandle. So we look at wind energy, we'll look at irrigated crops, we'll look at feedlots, and we'll look at the ethanol industry, or those are some of the things that we cover out there. And for some people, even in this current class, they've never been to the Panhandle. So it's like a foreign territory to them. And so they get out there and learn a new part of Oklahoma. It is kind of a foreign country. Yes, that is true. Well, it's closer than it is downstate. Yeah, that's true. The 10th seminar we spend in the southeastern part of the state. We usually go to a fish farm. This year, because of the drought, we weren't able to visit there, but the fishing industry for producing fish for stocking ponds is very interesting. We'll go down to the Idabel area and look at the poultry industry. And then we'll concentrate a half a day on the forest industry. It's hard for people in the central and western part of the state to think of a forest as a crop. when you're only taking a harvest every 30 to 32 years? And how do you manage that economically to have cash flow? So that's very important to see. And then in the central part or south central part, we'll look at sod farms and that special industry there. Then we'll go to the northeast. We'll start usually at the Port of Catoosa, look at the importance of the Port of Catoosa is the farthest inland port in the United States. And that's important to us in agriculture for marketing specifically our grain products. So we can get better prices there because they can go directly to the Gulf and then go anywhere in the world. And so that's a critical aspect. And then on the backside of that, they're bringing back to Oklahoma fertilizer. That's important for all of our crops. And we'll spend some time up at Miami at the JM Mushroom Farm. That's a huge industry. They send mushrooms to roughly, I think Courtney had to leave because she wasn't feeling well, but I think they distribute mushrooms to 10 states in the central region and that all comes from little Miami, Oklahoma. We'll usually look at the broiler industry also, although that particular facility has gone offline now. And then sometimes we'll go up to the Osage area and look at bison production. The 12th seminar is back in Stillwater, and that's the seminar that we currently are on, starting yesterday, go through tomorrow, where we mainly focus on our international program. So before you came, all the class members gave presentations this morning on different topics related to our travel to Israel next month. And so they get a chance to do some research on various topics and share with the rest of the group so that they become specific experts in a targeted area so that we don't all have to do our own individual research. We'll also sometimes have people from ODAF come in and talk about international marketing of products. She's holding a bottle of Head Country barbecue sauce. And so we'll sometimes talk about, how do you get an Oklahoma product marketed internationally? And then Sue Williams comes in and tells us, how do you pack in a small suitcase for 2 weeks? And we're going to have that discussion in the morning. So if you want to come, because some of these people on a 3-day seminar take too much luggage. I'll tell you that right now. This is just an example of where we've been since class 1 on international trips. Since I've become the director, I've tried to go to somewhere where we haven't ever been before. And so far I've been successful at doing that, although it's getting harder and harder because 2 things that we specifically look at: where can we get a good agricultural experience? And then the second thing is, where is it safe to travel internationally? Those are the 2 critical things that we look at. And I get anywhere from 4 to 6 proposals from an ag tour company that we've used for over 30 years out of Virginia. And then our advisory council looks at that, narrows that down to a couple, and then we go more in depth on those 2 countries or maybe a series of countries and look at where, again, can we get the best program for the current class. So these are going to be a few highlights from some of the trips since I was in the class. So my class went to China and South Korea. So we looked at hydroponic growing of like lettuce is what you see in that picture. The upper right is an open market where they're bringing in fresh produce. The temperature is freezing outside. So they've harvested these crops the night before, had to cover them with these thick blankets to bring them into the market to still have them fresh. The open meat market, which is kind of, a little gut wrenching to us in the United States because that's not the way we do it here, but that's very typical when you go to a foreign country. And then looking at, hand labor, that's how they load their manure spreader by hand. The next class, the class that my wife was in, went to Spain and Morocco. So they looked at olives, the wine industry. That left lower picture, you may wonder what that is. And if you want to go on Google Maps and just zoom into Spain, and you'll see all this white at the southern part of the country, those are all greenhouses. And my wife normally likes fresh produce out of the garden. And she said the tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers that they were growing in the greenhouses were the best tasting fruit that she's ever had. So they've got it down pat. And the reason they're kind of all jagged and not in any specific rows is they find a flat piece of rock that they can build these on. And that's why they're all they just take advantage of every piece of land that they have and build a greenhouse on. And you can see that on Google Maps. And then since they do a lot in the greenhouse, that lower one is showing that they bring in bees so they can get good pollination in their greenhouses. My first class I took to Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland. The gentleman in the upper right or upper left-hand corner, he's actually holding a passport because every individual livestock, cow, pig, chicken, has to have a passport just like you and I have a passport. And that passport has to be with that livestock wherever they go. So if you move a cow from this farm to this farm, the passport has to be in the truck that's taking them with it. So that's essentially animal ID tracing, so they know where that animal is at all times. So if a disease outbreak happens, they know the source and can trace that back so that they don't transfer that disease to other areas of the country or world. In the upper right, you see those tracks. Those are permanent tracks in the field. They call them tram lines. And that's where they will drive every time to do their planting or spraying or everything. So they're not compacting the soil in any other region. It's a different technique than what we use. We looked at the dairy industry and then wheat and barley. South Africa was our next adventure. So we looked at the fair deal agricultural system that they have down there. We went to a livestock farm. The livestock farm was alligators. So it's a feedlot for alligators because they use not only the meat, but the hides. So that was real interesting to see. We not only look at production agriculture, but the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources. That's why we went to the game preserve down there to look at how that is all managed. And then some of you may recognize Dr. Trapp in the orange hat. Sometimes the extension director goes with us. Dr. Doy has gone with us last year, but he's actually visiting with their extension director down there when we were at a plot where we had experimental plots going on. We went to the Philippines and Vietnam using water buffalo to plant rice. You see a lot of open air markets just in front of little stores. That's very common. They're making rice kind of like a pancake that's real thin in the lower left. And then in the Philippines, we were seeing pineapple production. And they're doing pineapple production on pretty steep hills, which is pretty amazing. Then we went with the next class to Nicaragua, Panama, and Costa Rica. So the gentleman in the upper left, those are bags of rice. He's carrying 3 bags of rice at a dairy. So a lot of these countries, they're not mechanized very well. And so they do a lot of hand labor. And we looked at tobacco production and making cigars in Nicaragua. In the Panama, of course, we went to the Panama Canal to learn about the importance of it as far as transportation of products, both imports and exports to the United States. And then in Costa Rica, we looked at some cattle production. And then the last class went to Chile when we almost got stuck there because a week after we got back is when everything shut down because of COVID. So we were fortunate to get back. But the upper left, we're looking at, it's an experimental station where they're looking at sunflower production and some corn production. The upper right is export area where they're inspecting all the fruits that are exported from Chile to the United States to make sure that we're not bringing any. So it's kind of a USDA sort of kind of facility so that we're not bringing any invasive pests back into the United States when they're exported. It's kind of hard to see it with the smaller picture in that lower left, but you see that ear of corn. Those ear of corns are about 18 inches and about that big around. It's called choclo, and it's a type of sweet corn, but those ears are huge, and that's a big market down there. And then again, we're looking at some commercial Angus production, and the person with the white hat is Dr. Doy. We also do community service. Like was said, we spent 2 hours yesterday doing just about every project we could think of because they thought it would take us all the time to do the first project and we were done in like 20 minutes. So then they, so they kept giving us stuff. So we had plenty to do, but we like to do community service when we're out. And that also gives our participants a chance to give back to the communities that we visit. So the upper left, we're doing some dishes at a community dinner that we served. The upper right is in Jones, where after a severe storm in the winter, this 102-year-old lady that lived in that house could not take care of all the broken down branches and broken trees. So we took chainsaws and a lot of pruning equipment and cleared her whole yard again a lot quicker than they thought we would be able to. Doing some trimming and landscaping work at a shelter in Ardmore. And then the lower right, we're painting some horse shelters at an equine therapy facility for children with special needs up in Enid. This kind of just shows you that the graduates that we've had in our program. So we've had 526 people graduate from our program since 1982. And these are some quotes is what I'm going to end with from alumni that have participated. And so I'll go ahead and read these, especially for some of the people that may be online. But Roy Lee Lindsay was in class 10 and he said, I believe I learned more about agriculture during my time in OALP than in any other program or experience. And I learned more about business and managing your business from my classmates than anywhere else. And you can see that in every class. You know, we do all of our formal seminars, but where a lot of the education comes is at night when they go down to the bar or sitting in the hotel lobby and they're exchanging ideas and sharing their knowledge with the other classmates. And that's where a lot of the education and connection comes from. Carol Cowan from class 14 said, this program will forever allow you to have connections. And that's consistent that we hear from every class, is they not only have connections with other ag people that they've gone through the program with, but they have an instant connection when we go out throughout the state and meet with our alumni. You say you're with OALP and it's like we're a whole big family that now you have, 500 other people that you could connect with and bounce ideas off or get advice from. Travis Jones says, frequently I look back on my experience and remember how fortunate I am to have been selected for such a great learning opportunity. John K. Squires from class 18 said, OALP will motivate you and encourage you to be prouder and louder about supporting the agriculture industry. The experiences of meeting a variety of agricultural producers and businesses will raise your awareness and appreciation for the diversity for which agricultural products are grown in Oklahoma. And that's one of the things we try to stress is, there are about 5 big things that most people think about when you're in Oklahoma agriculture. Wheat, cattle, poultry are probably the top 3. And then there are a couple others that kind of fluctuate 4 and 5. But agriculture is a lot more than that. It's the forestry industry, the mushroom industry, the fishing industry. And how, when we're taking a vote on a policy or making a decision in a commodity group, how is that decision that we're going to make not only affect that specific commodity, but all other ag in the state? And so that's what we're trying to do, is make them very well-rounded. Yes. Oh, definitely.
Sorry. Did you consider the marijuana industry part of agriculture?
Yes, it is, because it's a crop that's grown. Yep. So it definitely is part of the ag industry. The last quote that I'll share with you is from the gentleman from the last class, Jake Harriger. He said, the OALP is a great program to build your knowledge of agriculture and agricultural industries throughout Oklahoma, the U.S., and internationally. Participants will increase their knowledge base of agriculture, leadership skills and abilities, and their network of people in agriculture. This is a great program for both emerging leaders as well as those in leadership positions currently. So we like to have experienced people in the group, and essentially new people into the agricultural industry. And that's why one of the things I like about us taking the cap off of our age limit, which used to be 45. Well, I guess it used to be 40 way back when it started. Then we bumped it up to 45. That was before my time. And then during my time, we've taken that off. The council wasn't really excited about taking that cap off. And that was 3 classes or 2 classes, I guess 3 classes ago. We had gone specifically after one individual who was an ag producer, and he said, I don't have time, but Dad's getting ready to retire and turn it over to us boys. Dad has more time now. Why don't you go ask him to be? And it was like, okay, this is a different model that we haven't looked at before. And in my mind, I thought, well, you know, we could get that interaction from a very experienced, knowledgeable person that has 40 years of experience in the farming industry. And they could share that with these younger people. The younger people could learn something from him, and he could learn something about all of the new technology, you know, like Facebook and iPhones and all that stuff that he didn't know much about. And so they finally agreed to let him in. And it's probably been one of the most beneficial things we've done with our program, to now have that dichotomy in our program where we can share in both directions. So I thank you for your attention, and there's my contact information. I do have some brochures up here. If anybody wants a little more information, feel free to take those, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, and so would the current class members.
Is this program unique strictly to Oklahoma or Oklahoma State University, or do other ag schools in other states have
A lot of
similar programs?
other ag schools have them. They're not necessarily all structured like ours, but those are the 38 programs throughout the country that have programs similar to ours. Some of them aren't strictly ag. They may be ag and rural. And when I say ag and rural, the rural may include more like healthcare and things like that we don't really cover in our program. That's the way Arkansas runs theirs. They have maybe 25% strictly ag producers, and then the rest are rural people in their program. Yes.
Do you include the effect of climate change on
Yes, we
agriculture?
talk about climate change and that effect on how that not only impacts agriculture, but a lot of other parts of the climates that we deal with. Yes.
So how is this funded? I mean, the seminars and the study abroad and all that kind of.
Yeah, that's kind of what I covered in that. Just to give you an idea, the participants currently are paying $2,000 to participate in the program. When you do the calculation, and Dr. Trapp had me calculate this when probably in my 3rd year being the director, he said, we've got to look at what does it cost the program if we had to pull it and run it totally independent of everything else. And based on those numbers, it costs us between $22,000 and $24,000 per person to run the program. So the participants are paying about 1/11 of the cost. We can have up to 30 people in the class, and that's according to our bylaws, and that's about the maximum that you can handle easily. And it's getting harder and harder to get into some places with that large of a group. Yeah, so Greg Pickens was one of our class members in the last class. So I think he's the only Rotary member here. Yeah. So again, I appreciate your time and learning more about the agricultural leadership program.